Hey, thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk about how to write note cards for a speech. And have you ever been speaking and all of a sudden your mind goes blank completely? That's the worst, right? It's happened to me way too much. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about the importance of note cards and how to put them together. They're really not that difficult, but they can be a lifesaver on stage especially. And so I'm going to give you some of my techniques and tricks that'll be helpful to you. And here's one thing I'll divulge to you. I am a Hall of Fame speaker. Yeah, I might be the only Hall of Fame speaker that actually admits to needing notes. I am so much needful of these things because there's something that happens when I get on stage, no matter how many times I've rehearsed, that my brain has gone completely blank. And unfortunately, this can be a real train wreck for the audience especially. And so as a speaker, I, as a Hall of Fame speaker, have used note cards my entire career. And I'm excited to tell you about some of the ways that you can effectively do them. We're not just talking about handwritten notes here. We're talking about using your iPad or your iPhone, other situations that will get you out of a sticky mess when you're going, oh man, I should have brought some notes up here with me. Rather than reading the whole note card, I'll give you some tips about how you can use these. And it's going to change the way you speak. It'll improve your confidence. We're going to have a great time. Thanks for joining me today. So let's first start with where you use a note card. Now, whenever I'm giving a speech, I'm usually out of town, and so I'm staying at a hotel. What they have in those hotels is something that has become very valuable to me. It's that little pad of paper that looks like it's 5 or 6 pieces with a pen. What's fun about that for me is that allows me to focus my thoughts for the notes I want to have for the speech I'm about to give. Even if it's a speech that is my keynote speech, which in general, as a speaker who makes a living at it, you create a speech that becomes your keynote that you give every time, but you do want to customize it to every single audience. And so then you're going to insert certain things that you don't want to forget. Most of the time, what I write on my note cards, and when I say note cards, I mean the pad of paper in the hotel room, I will literally just write the name or the thought or the quote, that thing that needs to just jog my memory in a split second by looking down at it. And I'll carry it on stage with me, and I'll just set it on a highboy or on the podium, or I'll keep it in my pocket, and sometimes I'll literally pull it out and I'll say, this was important enough for me to write it down so I don't forget. The audience actually appreciates that. You can also use an iPad. You can use your iPhone. I'd recommend probably not the iPhone because it's small. So you can only get the words big enough for you to look down and see and not have to hone in on it. You really want to make it so that the audience thinks, oh, they're just glancing down at their notes. And nobody really finds it a problem as far as I know, unless you're in some type of competition where you can't have notes. We're not talking about that today though. We're just talking about how good note cards can be. I hope that's a helpful tip for you. But let's talk about why note cards matter. I mean, for sure they do. In fact, doing this video, when I committed to making this channel and doing these videos, the producer and the directors told me, you cannot have teleprompter. Now, I'm really good with teleprompter. In fact, I can make it seem natural. And the people think that I'm not reading at all, I'm just talking. However, because of the way that these videos are made, we wanted to make it so that it was absolutely organic. And so what I have right in front of me, I'll just give you a little behind the scenes. I do have notes. I have them on here. You can kind of see that, I think, why note cards matter. And then I have some scripting. This is not word for word. This is just a bullet point that allows me to make it through the video, or at least through the next point. And then you'll notice we do an absolute edit. And so that's part of how we do it in video form. On stage, obviously, there are no edits. And so you have to have your note cards spelled out in an order that you can just glance down and see the word or the symbol or the design or the picture that reminds you so that you can go into the next piece. But really, maintaining eye contact is one of the most important parts of this. And so as a speaker, you want to glance down at your notes and then look right back up. You don't want to be down here too long, or else you've now made a disconnect with the audience. Do you feel that? It's almost like we're gone, right? And so I want you to consider how you have your eye contact with the audience, you glance down at your note, and then you look back up. It's very simple. Newscasters do this. You can see people all over the sports world. If you watch any kind of sporting event, these people just glance down and then they look back up. It's a very simple way to do it. So let's talk about some key principles of writing your note cards. First of all, clarity. Keep it simple. make it clear. Make it so that you can glance down really quickly and just see maybe 1 or 2 words that get you started. Or in my experience, I need about 5 words to launch me into giving a quote. For example, I have a quote that is very hard for me to remember for whatever reason. And so when I glance down at my notes, the words literally say, as quickly as this phone. That's all that I have on there. As quickly as this phone, and then that gets me started so that then I can launch into the full quote, which is, as quickly as this phone can connect you to the world, it can just as easily disconnect you from your family. And so do you see how that helped me just get started? I just needed a couple of words to get me rolling. And this is a great technique that a lot of speakers use. Here's some unique ideas for effective note cards. I'd say first to color code them. And that would be just a very simple usage of different colors. So one color might be, you might do red for when you're going to say something that's a quote of somebody's, or blue for a story you're going to tell, or I don't know if you want to use yellow because it might not show up, but maybe green might be a good point you're going to land. And so these types of things really help a lot. In fact, when I've trained people that do arena events or stadiums, because I get to train a lot of people that are hosts, MCs, that are running game shows, that are actually doing big award shows. They need to be able to glance down and just essentially see the color so that they know which amount of energy to use or which game they're going to share. And that's been a real effective way of using note cards. We've talked already a little bit about visual cues, but I love this idea. You could use a sticker, you could do a smiley face, you could do some kind of just symbol or just a little drawing of something just to jog your memory. That's all you're looking for with the note card. Keywords and phrases, I would say that those are some of the best things you could write on there. And just like I had with my quote that I just gave, keywords are really essential. I'll oftentimes just write the keywords such as my speech is the promise, but I'll also have it just outlined, the audience, the family, the one. Those are my main topics, and so within the promise. And so when I see the audience, I go, oh, I'm speaking on the audience for this first part. Now I can go for it. You also might want to consider timing notes. This allows you to look down and realize, oh, I usually do this in 10 minutes. And then you can match it up with the clock that's in front of you and you can say, oh, I went through that way too fast, or I'm over time, now I need to cut a little bit more from the next piece. So to actually have your notes and then a little timestamp, really smart move. You could also do a highlight emphasis, which is, if you were to write a bunch of your speech, that's fine. Just don't look down and read it. Now, the other thing you could do is use a highlighter and just highlight certain portions or underline them so that you remember, you look down and you go, oh yeah, that word, and then you go. There's also story reminders. I might even just put a little picture of somebody that reminds me of the story that I'm going to tell, or I might just write my daughter's name, Ella, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to tell the story about Ella and when she went to prom with that one boy, and then I go into the piece, but I have just her name, Ella. It helps me with the story. A lot of people think they need to write down the entire story on their notes. I mean, if you want to write them down, that's fine, but I would recommend that, start it this way. Write the entire story on your notes and then grab another note card and see how short you can write that story while still not forgetting all the details, but not writing them all. And then you could take another blank note card and try it again. Slowly pare down the storytelling to the point that you have only a word or two that can get you through the full story. Now you've written the story essentially multiple times. Your note cards help pare you down to the point that you only need so many words, to the point that actually you may not even need the note cards at all. So I like to also write on my note cards or on my iPhone, and usually that's what I bring out on stage with me is either the pad of paper from the hotel or just my iPhone, and I'll usually write a question because for whatever reason, when I get on stage and I haven't done this right before I go on stage, something triggers in my brain when they introduce me. The audience applause, I take the microphone, everything goes blank, and I just start blabbing until I finally get to the point. If I do this effectively like I'm teaching you here, if I take my phone out and I hold it and look at it, the question I usually write on there is my first question I'm going to ask the audience, which is, have you ever been to a concert where the artist didn't play the song you came to hear? That may seem like a simple way to start a speech, but for me, I forget that line all the time, unless I have it on my notes or on my phone right before I go out. And as they're introducing me, I'm reading that. That's what I'm going to say first. Put it in my pocket, walk out on stage, deliver the line. Works every time. We've talked about quotes. Just one more reminder. Write down the entire quote if you need to, because you can't get through it, or just write down the very first few words in order to launch into it. Let's talk about pauses and breathing. I know this might sound odd, but I saw the note cards of a very important speaker. He's a big time guy. He's actually been in one of the biggest bands in the world called Earth, Wind and Fire. He was their keyboardist. And I remember looking at his notes. He had everything I'm talking about here today for you. He had colors, he had slashes, he had timestamps, and then I noticed there was a big gap in his notes, and I said, "What is this about?" And he goes, "Oh, that's to remember pausing and breathing." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "I just speak so quickly, and I'm playing the piano too, that I need to pause." And so I wrote a pause into my note cards. I thought, I like this guy. You can also write down your transitions. Transitions are really tough to remember sometimes because you have your keywords, you have your quotes, you have all the different things, but what about the way you get from here to there? Sometimes I don't even write down any more of my keywords, any more quotes. I don't need to write any of them, but I do want to make sure I write down the transitionary phrase to get from one piece to another. Now I'm going to give you a bonus, and this is a secret of the stars, so don't tell anybody, especially I want you to realize that a lot of speakers use their PowerPoint slides as their way of cheating without having notes on stage. They are able to look up at their slides once they click on it, and that actually triggers in their mind what direction they're going to continue on. A lot of speakers get on stage and they just meander down a river and they don't know where they're going. They don't have a particular direction. What is so smart about the secret of the stars is that they have slides that can trigger their next thought. This is something I've used for many years, and I'm grateful for that as well. Now, it's not to say that note cards aren't okay to have on stage. Of course they are, but slides are really cool to be able to use as well. And so if these have been helpful to you, I would love for you to put in the comments which one you're going to commit to. And at the same time, I'd love to invite you to what's called Liftoff Lab. If you go to liftofflab.com, that's where we have a community of speakers that are all working to get better at these types of things. They're all using note cards, no doubt, and as I am as well. But go to liftofflab.com. Please join us. We'll get better at speaking. See you at the next speech.